So if y'all were here last Sunday, you know, as Emily introduced it, that we are beginning a season focusing on desire. And when she spoke last week about not wanting to spend months preaching on desire, I was right there with her. Now, in other churches, that might not have been true. Spent a lot of time over the last decade plus thinking on desire and writing about it in relation to modern culture and in relation to the Sermon on the Mount. And you'll get a bit of that, in a few minutes. As a matter of intellectual engagement, I'm comfortable with the subject area, as you might say. And I think we have to be. I truly, very strongly think we have to be if we want to have any hope at all of our community and our culture hearing the gospel of Jesus Christ as good news instead of, the straitjacket and prison that so much of the world believes it to be. But there's the pesky little thing about this congregation. This long ingrained expectation and understanding that merely intellectual engagement is not enough. Now, if you're going to preach here, you have to be willing to lay your soul on the line. There's a lot that's changed in VSF over the decade and more that we've been here, and the 7 years or so that I've been preaching here with some frequency. But that expectation has not changed, in part because of some of the folks, like Dick and Nancy Rooker, who are still out there, David and Denise Terry, I could go on, and in part because working with Tim Pointer when he was still, the coordinator for worship in this congregation, he ground that expectation into me so thoroughly that I bring it with me into the pulpit, not just whenever I open the Word with you on a Sunday, but anywhere I go, whether I like it or not. And in light of that expectation, when Emily was singing the melody, I was harmonizing right along on the bass line. I told Phil Whistler after the service last week that, as Jamie Winship would put it, my truth about God is that God has spent most of a decade trolling me. God has trailed opportunities in front of me until I couldn't help myself but ask for them. And as soon as I started asking, he would slam the door shut. And maybe you think I'm making it up. Maybe you think I'm being overdramatic, or that it's just the various cognitive biases. But two things. One, this pattern repeated over and over and over. I have lost count of how many times. And two, God actually sort of confirmed my understanding of this. Back in 2017, and so that was really kind of early in this whole journey for me and for us, there was an opening at a church in Southern Oregon, which I knew immediately would never give me even a cursory first look. Just was no way. And so I decided to protect my heart and ignore it. And I heard God tell me to send them my stuff and open myself up to the opportunity anyway. And I told him no. I said I was not going to do that. It would be pointless. I was never going to be taken seriously there. No, I'm not going to do that. And God didn't disagree with anything I said. He just commanded me to do it anyway. He commanded me to open my heart to hope, even knowing that that hope would be quickly crushed. I will never be able to move internally into the experience of Hosea being commanded by God to go and marry a prostitute, but I have a bit of a pale echo of that. of what it is to be told by God to walk into something that is going to hurt you because it is going to hurt you. And so I did. And I was right. I never even received an acknowledgement of my email. But for some reason, I needed to make the deliberate, intentional choice to expose my heart in that way, to open myself wide to the hurt of being rejected unseen, instead of avoiding it and protecting myself from it. And I still don't understand why. But that was not the last time. You know, for the past 10 years, my almost unbroken experience of asking God anything in prayer has been his refusal. I have more than once, and I think even once in a message here, pulled Casserol's line from The Curse of Chalion. It's a novel I've quoted occasionally from the pulpit, including a couple weeks ago. Casserole is the main character and the viewpoint character. That I do not hate anyone enough to inflict the results of my prayers on them. And yet, God has kept me praying. And whenever my capacity for hope has died, he has picked his time and brought it back to life. A resurrection I have never yet asked for, but have been granted every time anyway. I have asked him many times over these last 10 years to strip me of all earthly desires so I wouldn't have to hurt anymore. And spoiler alert, he said no every time. And not only that, he has led me to the point where giving me everything I desire in this life would violate most of the basic laws of physics. It is impossible, utterly impossible, for me to be back in ministry full time and back close to my parents and my brother, which, given the state of my mother's health, that one just hurts more and more every time, and be close to all of my children as they're busy preparing to spread themselves across the map, and also be here full time and every Sunday. I would have to be in multiple places at once. Y'all would have to be in multiple places at once, along with a whole bunch of other people. And that is just not on. It ain't happening in this world. And so, dive into all that. Sign somebody else up, please. But, as the late, great Rich Mullins said, and I've quoted this before, I know, it don't do to fight with God because he always wins. He bloodies your nose, then he gives you a ride home on his bicycle, and that's no way to live. And the truth is, if I'm going to say and mean and believe that it is critically important for us to grapple with the subject of desire, if we're to have any hope of saying anything meaningful to anybody in this world as we know it, and it is, that means I have to be willing to face my own desire head on. We all have to be willing to face our desire, to look it right in the eyes, whatever the load of grief and hurt it might be trucking along with it. If we don't, we will never understand the world or ourselves. Which is not really a new thing. It's probably always been true. But I do think that it's truer now in Western culture than it has been in most places in the world for the millennium or two. 1952, President Eisenhower, between his election to the White House and his inauguration, said, "Our form of government has no sense unless it is founded in a deeply felt religious faith, and I don't care what it is." His sole concern was that it must be a religion with all men being created equal. And we're seeing now where that sort of understanding leads. Because we have shifted from a civil religion that was essentially watered down, inoculated Christianity to one which is increasingly pagan. And at the head of the pantheon, like the Greeks with Zeus and Hera, stands a power couple, desire and identity. But they get along much better than Zeus and Hera did, as they jointly uphold the central tenet of this civil religion. You are your desires. And the political enactment of that civil religion is what the theologian, political philosopher, and essayist R.R. Reno has called the empire of desire. Our governing elites, political, cultural, and intellectual, across the political spectrum, this is not a partisan thing, increasingly enshrine the primacy of identity and desire. The chief differences between the leaders of our two primary political tribes lie in who they side with when desires and identities clash, as they inevitably do. All other claims, all other arguments must bow to identity and desire. But that's not the sum of the matter. That's only the most obvious way in which politics in Western culture is the politics of desire. Because the desires that we know that we're arguing about are only the most obvious ones. I referenced earlier, The Curse of Chalion by Lois McMaster Bujold. This is my other favorite of her books, from her sort of main sci-fi series, the novel Memory. And the speaker here is Simon Ilian, is the former head of Imperial Security, the culture that she is named, Barrayar, talking to the main character of the series, his former protege and junior officer, Miles Verkosigan. The motivations of men: money, power, revenge, sex. But they were almost never actually that simple. Then Prime Minister Vortala was engaged in heavy negotiations with the Napoleons over the Wormhole Access Treaty and was trying anything he could think of to sweeten the deal. The Napoleon ambassador indicated to Vortala that what he'd really always secretly wanted most in his life was an elephant. To this day, I don't know if he really wanted an elephant or if it was just the most absurd and impossible thing to ask for he could think of on the spur of the moment. So anyway, the word came down. It was really the head of Galactic Affairs' department, but I gave the assignment to my IMSEC agent personally, just so I could watch. I can still see this glazed look that comes over his face as he choked, and how big does this elephant have to be, sir? There aren't many moments like that in my job. I cherish them. It was before your time, or you know who would have been the first man I'd have thought of. Oh, thanks. So, did your agent locate an elephant? He was IMSEC to the core, of course he did. A small one. I assigned myself to the detail the day Vortala delivered it to the Napoleon embassy, too. In that fruity, deadpan voice of his, a gift from my imperial master, Gregor Vorbara. Gregor must have been about 10 then, and likely would have preferred to keep the beast himself. Your father prudently didn't let him know he'd ever given away an elephant. And did Vortala get his treaty? Of course. I think the ambassador really did want an elephant, because after he got over being stunned and flummoxed, he was clearly delighted. They kept it in the back of the embassy compound for about a year, and he used to bathe and groom it himself until he took it home with him. It expanded my worldview ever after. Money, power, sex, and elephants. We argue about the first three of those ad nauseum. I think we really need to be intentional about looking for not the elephants in the room, but the elephants in the culture. And one big one is the desire for belonging, which is one I remember very, very well. I still know very, very well. There have always been misfits. I was one. Didn't begin to change until I got to high school and started to find friends to be misfit with. Started to find my people. But it's a lot more threatening and a lot more precarious to be a misfit now than it used to be. 40 years ago, there were a lot more guardrails and handrails and support structures in the society and the culture. And that's a huge topic. It's been explored by folks like Robert Putnam in his book Bowling Alone, Charles Murray, in his book Coming Apart, or Reno Again. But at the same time as that's been happening, our educational system has increasingly become about getting a good job, which means it's more and more a servant of the economy, the purpose of which is to prepare serfs for our major corporations. And so that creates a situation in which you're told from very early on that you have to do all these things right or you're not going to get a good job and you're going to fail at life. And there's a lot fewer things to lean on and a lot fewer guides as to how exactly you're supposed to be about doing that. And it's left a lot of people in this country and a large percentage of our youth, just ask anyone who teaches in the high schools, who see no realistic path to winning at life. And faced with that, a lot of them withdraw into dissipation. The pursuit of whatever source of cheap stimulation and pleasure seems best. Others respond by embracing another desire, the desire to be seen and heard. 250 years ago, even if it was limited to white male adult citizens, our political system was at least designed to ensure that all of them were seen and heard. The great political problem of our age is that our country has vastly outgrown that system and is now far too big for it to work. The predictable result is that people with money, power, and or elite abilities get seen and heard, while everyone else gets missed. And out of that, everyone else, those who don't accept it go looking for a remedy. It's not new, it's been building for a while. That's what explains the meteoric and deeply weird political career of H. Ross Perot. And if Perot was the antitype, Donald J. Trump is the type. Pro-Trump or anti-Trump, it really doesn't matter on this one. We have to reckon with this reality, that his political ascendancy is powered by the furious desire of millions of people screaming into the void, demanding to be seen, demanding to have names, not just be statistics. And if that sounds bleak to you, well, I've said more than once, I don't do hope wonderfully well. But you know what else was bleak? Life in Israel under the rule of Rome and the governance of their violent, amoral, ruthless, vicious, paranoid, and terrifyingly competent ally, Herod the Great. And it was there and then, in the blackest night, to a pair of exhausted, small-town, blue-collar migrants who were exiled with the animals because they were a disgrace to the family. That is where the hope of the world was born. And I think I can safely say that Herod the Great would make mincemeat of our entire ruling class, given half an opportunity. So I can lay out how bleak it feels to me, and I hear God rebounding it back at me and saying, who are you to lose hope? Look what I've already done. And indeed, if God could do that, then we should not lose heart. We just need to lose our current perspective. And so, by a long and wandering route, I worked my way around to our scripture this morning, Psalm 146. I think we really need to approach this text sitting in the middle of the problem, to which I believe it offers us the corrective and the curative. And the root of the problem to which the psalmist speaks is that our love is corrupted and twisted by our desires. And we put our hope in the fulfillment of our desires. And so we look to this world for that fulfillment, which leads us necessarily to put our trust in human beings who seem to have the power to make that fulfillment possible. And that, as the psalmist tells us, is profoundly misguided. Now let's pause a minute here, to unpack something as far as the root of the problem going here. Because we have, for the different ways in which our love gets twisted and warped, a very useful diagnostic tool called the 7 deadly sins, which we might better think of as 7 great roots of temptation, which are pride, envy, wrath, greed, gluttony, lust, and then one which in English is usually labeled sloth. And the interesting thing about these 7 is that they can all be categorized as sins of corrupted love in 3 different ways. First, there are the sins of distorted love, in which love of self goes bad. These are pride, envy, and wrath. Then there are the sins of disordered love, of loving the gift above or instead of the giver. Greed, gluttony, and lust. And I think if you look around the landscape, you can see many, many ways in which these are driving people to put their trust in princes. And of course, I've only named 6. What are the 7th? Well, this is one of my besetting struggles with sin. It's the sin of defective love. It can result in sloth, yes, not out of laziness, but out of the sense that nothing is worth doing because none of it will matter anyway. But it doesn't just necessarily drive us into torpor. It can also drive hyperactivity and workaholism out of a crawling need for stimulation and the desire to feel something, anything, that will make it worth the time and effort to breathe. It is the sin of not caring enough about anything. Its ultimate expression is despair. And if you were here during COVID, you might remember I did a video on it, and its name is acedia. I had to laugh when Emily brought it up last week, and wondering how to pronounce it. It's like, I got sort of the, well, of course I did kind of thing. It's not just me and words or whatever. This is an old and an intimate enemy for me, and I know it well. And in our time, in our place, I think this might be the most important of these to grapple with, because it shows us 2 important truths. One, that contra my desperate and somewhat deranged prayers over the years, being without desire would not be a good thing. Desire, like anger, is a driver that gives us the energy to change and to bring change. We need them properly harnessed. They can do great damage when unleashed, yes, but that doesn't make them bad in themselves. It means that they need to be in their proper place, not on a pedestal as an idol. And 2, desire run rampant is ultimately self-consuming, because acedia is where you end up when your desires have burned out your love. If you're free to do whatever you want, stop and think. Are you in control? Or is want in control? True freedom is the freedom not to do what you want, because then you are making the decisions, not your desires. Then you can choose to act in keeping with a deeper desire which you are not feeling at that moment. You can choose to do the thing that you know you will be glad looking back on that you did. Not the thing that everything you feel is screaming at you to do right now. Without that freedom, you end up flogged to exhaustion, seeing no point in anything because nothing has satisfied you. So we have these various directions in which our desires can corrupt our love, leading us to seek our good in the world around us, which causes us to put our trust in human leaders to bring about our good. And to that, Psalm 146 holds up a big sign reading, "Stop. Stop. Don't go there. Put not your trust in princes." Why? Because they're bad? No, some of them are good as humans go. Don't put your trust in them either, because even they can't save you. Even the best of them die. And all they create eventually dies. But note what brackets that warning. That's what we get in verses 2 and 3 of the psalm. Look at verses 1 and 4. I will praise the Lord all my life. I will sing praise to my God as long as I live. Blessed are those whose help is the God of Jacob, whose hope is in the Lord their God. And the rest of the psalm lays out for us why that's true. There's three things. It's very interesting. It's another sort of a sandwich structure, just like the first four verses. One, God's faithfulness is not time limited. He is faithful forever because he's the one who made all that is. And maybe that doesn't exactly sound like it logically follows, but there's two things here. First, God has the power to be faithful because he has the power to accomplish whatever he sets out to do because he made all of it. You know, it's like a toddler with, a lump of Play-Doh in a way. Obviously God is vastly bigger than a toddler, but by comparison, we are no bigger than the Play-Doh. A toddler might be, limited in many ways, but let me tell you something, whatever he wants done to that Play-Doh is going to be done to that Play-Doh. Smashed, twined up, spread out on the walls, eaten, whatever it might be. And that is with that minimal degree of understanding. Now imagine the power of an infinite and infinitely good God to make all things ultimately right. And second, God has the will to be faithful because he made this world. And he wants the work of his hands to be what he intended it to be. So he is going to make it right. And so he both can and will be faithful forever. And then the middle section of this second part of the psalm, look at the specific forms that his faithfulness takes. God enacts justice for the exploited and oppressed. He protects the vulnerable and provides for those in need. And he heals the wounds that this world inflicts. And three, again, God is faithful forever because he does not die. And therefore his plans do not die, nor do they fail. And this underscores the point that for all the harm that our unrestrained desires do, and all the dark places to which they take us, desire is not the problem. The problem is the mangled and twisted reality of our world, which distorts, disorders, and defiles our desires. We were created as beings with desire because we were created to desire the good, the true, and the beautiful. To expand on what I said a few moments ago, in this fallen world, we need desire to drive us toward holiness, just as we need anger to drive us toward justice. For all that both can and often do drive us in exactly the wrong direction, we will not have the energy or the thirst for holiness or justice without them. The opposite of desire and anger is not goodness in any form. It is indifference. And mark this well, those who are indifferent toward God are farther from God and harder to reach than those who hate him. Our desires don't need to be repressed and condemned. They need to be healed and purified. In truth, they need to be put to death and resurrected. As Kent Denlinger taught me to say, we need to move from condemnation to curiosity. And as part of that, we need to be willing to learn that our true desires are not what we think they are. To discover that we don't know what we want as well as we think we do. And to have our experience of our desires change. We need to submit them to God, not demand God submit to them. We need to lay them at his feet and let go, not because they are too great and powerful to bear, but because they are too small and weak to serve their purpose. As C.S. Lewis has George MacDonald say in The Great Divorce, nothing, not even what is lowest and most bestial, will not be raised again if it submits to death. It is sown a natural body, it is raised a spiritual body. Flesh and blood cannot come to the mountains, not because they are too rank, but because they are too weak. What is a lizard compared with a stallion? Lust is a poor, weak, whimpering, whispering thing compared with that richness and energy of desire which will arise when lust has been killed. And there's something deeply true and deeply important in that. Ultimately, where is it that our desires are truly pointing us? At the truest level of our souls, where do we really want to go? We want to go to the mountain of our joy, to the city of our peace. And it's a sad thing that the way that a lot of people and a lot of churches preach the Bible, you'd think it's mostly about condemning sin and beating up on sinners, which is not true at all. As biting as the scriptural critique of human sin can be, that's because sin destroys what is good. And it destroys the people whom God made, whom he loves. And the good is ultimately what Scripture is on about. Over and over, it gives us a vibrant, expansive, abundant vision of human flourishing and the flourishing of the whole world, almost beyond imagination. One example of many is another of our lectionary texts for this morning, Isaiah 35. The desert and the parched land will be glad. The wilderness will rejoice and blossom. Like the crocus, it will burst into bloom. It will rejoice greatly and shout for joy. The glory of Lebanon will be given to it, the splendor of Carmel and Sharon. They will see the glory of the Lord, the splendor of our God. Strengthen the feeble hands, steady the knees that give way. Say to those with fearful hearts, be strong, do not fear. Your God will come. He will come with vengeance. With divine retribution, he will come to save you. Then will the eyes of the blind be opened and the ears of the deaf unstopped. Then will the lame leap like a deer and the mute tongue shout for joy. Water will gush forth in the wilderness and streams in the desert. The burning sand will become a pool. In the thirsty ground, bubbling springs. In the haunts where jackals once lay, grass and reeds and papyrus will grow. And a highway will be there. It will be called the way of holiness. It will be for those who walk on that way. The unclean will not journey on it. Wicked fools will not go about on it. No lion will be there, nor any ravenous beast. They will not be found there, but only the redeemed will walk there. And those the Lord has rescued will return. They will enter Zion with singing. Everlasting joy will crown their heads. Gladness and joy will overtake them. And sorrow and sighing will flee away. You know, we keep trying to scale Mount Zion with our bare hands and build the city of our peace on our own. And we can't do it. We keep making messiahs of our political candidates and investing our politics with the weight of that expectation. And we need to lay that down. Stop looking for salvation in a human leader. Politics can't bear the weight. No human politician can meet that expectation. And I don't want to say that there aren't serious things that we talk about, because there are. But we take it all much too seriously, because we think that the whole weight of those issues rests on our shoulders and rests on our side winning. And so we lose perspective. We lose our sense of humor. We lose our sense of joy. And we lose community, undoing all that we're trying to do. We keep slipping into the belief that it's on us to build the city of our peace, and it just isn't. And the psalmist grabs us and says, don't put your trust in human messiahs. They will inevitably fail and disappoint you. Put your hope in the God of Israel. And remember what he's already done. What we cannot do, God has already done. In this season of Advent, let us refocus our desires, or rather, allow God to do so in us. And let us recalibrate our waiting. Not waiting for the next election, for the next candidate, for the next victory. Let us give up the hope of that. Let's give up the hope of finding a Messiah in the ballot box and look instead to the one true Messiah who has come and is coming again. And to do this, first of all, above all, let us look to the table. Because here, we see the physical remembrance of all that Jesus did for us in our time on earth. He came into this world to share our life with us in all our joys and sorrows, pleasures and pains, hopes and fears. He died for us to pay in full the penalty for our sin. He rose again to conquer sin and death. And by his death, resurrection, and ascension, he has established a new and eternal covenant of grace and reconciliation, that we might be accepted by God and never forsaken. Christ has died. Christ is risen. Christ will come again. And here we touch the physical reminder that Jesus gathers us to this table by his Spirit. And not just us here today, all his people across the world, across the whole span of time. And by his Spirit, though we cannot see him yet, he sits at the head of the table, inviting us to come. He holds out the bread to us and says, "Take, eat. This is my body given for you. Do this in remembrance of me. Christ has died. Christ is risen. Christ will come again. And here we taste the physical representation of hope. A future promise made present reality in bread and wine. The kingdom of God is a feast. And for all who are his children, your places are already set at the table. And Jesus offers us the cup, saying, "This is the new covenant in my blood, shed for you, shed for many, for the forgiveness of sins." Every time you drink of it, remember me. Christ has died. Christ is risen. Christ will come again. And all God's people said, "Come quickly, Lord Jesus." But children of God, come to the table of the Lord, set for you. Jesus is waiting. Come, come, for all things are now ready.